All right, guys, welcome to another live stream. Welcome to another live stream. In today's live stream, we're going to talk about how everybody's financial goals are different, but they should be realistic. Now, when you say realistic, you can look at it from two angles. One, the first angle that most people look at the word realistic is, oh, let's be realistic. Like this person can't achieve this, or everybody can't get to this certain number. But when I look at realistic, it's it's basically saying, look at what everything costs and, base your financial goals off of what reality is, what things are costing today. And most people don't do that. Most people go off of how they feel, what they have been surrounded by. And I say it all the time, like your financial views are uh, are determined by what you're surrounded by. So, for instance, if you are surrounded by people that are broke or people that don't really have too much ambition, your financial goals are not going to be anything substantial, right? You might be okay with making $12 an hour, but we know making $12 an hour can't support the average family. So, you know, we need to be realistic when we talk about financial goals. And I think there's a standard. I think there's a standard in which everybody should follow. Most people probably won't agree with this because most people think it's impossible to reach these type of numbers. But I think for the most part, with a decent job and consistent investing, I think you could get to this number. And the number for me is $10,000 a month. I think that's kind of the minimum number that people need to support their lifestyle. And so, in order to get 10,000 a month, you're going to need, you got to use the rule of 200. So whatever you need a month, you have to times that by 200. And I believe that number would be 2 million. Right now, you don't need to. Now again, 2 million is a big number, but I think over time, let's say by 40 or 50, I think most people could get to that number. But it's more about putting in the work and just again being realistic about what you need to survive. Now, obviously, you could survive on less than $10,000 a month. Maybe you could do it with 6 or 7. But again, you're not really accounting for any type of emergency, inflation, and things like that. So if we look at the average cost of rent, I mean, most people are paying 2,500 up, right, for rent, and for a pretty small square footage, right? Like right now, I'm living in a more fancier, I guess you would say, area. So I'm paying 2,300 in rent, and square footage is like 700 to 800 square foot. But even for a typical home, like even if you live in the suburbs, even if you're not living downtown in a prime area, you're going to be paying at least 23 to 2,500 for a decent home. Now, if you have a family, if you have kids, this is probably it might go up in price. I know before, and I'm going all over the place, right? I'm just going with what comes to mind. But I know before you could probably get a home at 2 to 3% interest rate, and maybe you could get a 2,500 to 3,000 square foot home, paying 2,000 to 2,200 bucks a month. You're not going to get that right now in the current interest rate environment that we're in, or just the prices of homes have gone up, and I don't think they're going to be coming down. So you need to be realistic on the price of things, right? Not realistic, because again, when we talk about realistic, every time you hear somebody say realistic, they're always thinking about what somebody can't do opposed to, what things are actually costing in the work that people need to actually put in to have a decent lifestyle. So again, so let's say the minimum's 10,000 a month. You're paying 2,500 a month for rent. Okay, now you have to add in medical expenses. If you have 2 to 3 people in the family, maybe your spouse and then maybe a kid, you're probably paying upwards to 600 to 700 bucks a month for medical expenses, right? To have some medical insurance, that's going to put you at 3,000. Food for 3 people is probably going to be upwards to 1,000 to 1,500 bucks a month. That's another thing that has inflated in price. So, 1,000 to 1,500 dollars a month. So now you have 2,300 or 2,500 for your rent. You have 700 in medical expenses. That's 32, and let's just say you're paying 1,000 bucks for food. That's 4,200. Okay, so and again, we're assuming that, and this is assuming that you haven't paid off your home. Most people are not going to pay off their home. Everybody's like, oh, just purchase a home. You're going to save so much money. But realistically, most people don't purchase their first home until they're 30. And most people get a 30-year mortgage. So if you decide to quote unquote pay off your home, you won't pay it off until you're 60, unless you're doing some side businesses, which you should be doing, or some side hustles. But most of that money is not going to go to paying off the mortgage. Most people, what they do is they just pay the mortgage until they sell the home, or pay the mortgage until they pay it outright, right? Until they own the home outright. And yeah, so I think for the average person, you're always going to have a rent payment. So when I do these calculations, and also people are not so keen to staying in one place nowadays. Most people want to move around. They want to move to different cities. They want to move to different states. So you're most likely going to want to move around. So I doubt most people will not have a mortgage at age 60. Most people will probably opt to be renting. So I think you need to include rent in that monthly expense when it comes to what you're going to need when you decide to. Again, this is also, well, the money you're going to need when you decide to stop working, and when or you're just letting your investments take over, right? You're not in the workforce anymore. Maybe you're doing some side stuff, but you have your assets that are bringing you this 10,000 a month, and it's going to help you pay your expenses. So this is kind of what I'm talking to. And most people, again, want to do this at an earlier time frame. Most people don't want to retire at 60. If you think about it, most people only live up to 75 or 80. So when you really think about it, at age 35, you're halfway there to checking out. So most people want to get to that whatever that number is. Again, I say the minimum's 10,000 because a lot earlier. They want to get to that number a lot earlier. And again, minimum for me is 10,000, and we're going into the calculation. So we said 2,500 in rent, 700 in medical insurance. That's 32. 1,000 in food each month. That's 42. And that food is assuming you don't go out to eat. You start throwing out a couple restaurants a month, and maybe some fast food or whatever you decide to do. You get some yogurt or ice cream. Those things add up. So I'm just saying 1,000 to just go on the lower side, but for a lot of you, that expense is going to be a lot higher. That food expense is probably going to be more upwards to that $1,500 range. And again, when you are retired, quote unquote retired, you typically want to go out more. You're in the house more. People fail to realize this. People think like, oh, I'm retired. You think you need less money But I think you need more money because one, you're not working, and then two, you're going to be at home, you're going to get bored, and you're going to want to do things. You're going to want to travel. You're going to want to do all these other things. But just keeping the main expenses in line here, we had rent, we have medical expenses. I'm going with the necessary stuff, and we have food. Transportation is another thing, unless again, most people don't want to use the same car. You could have the same car, but again, that car is going to most likely incur expenses each month because cars get old. They need maintenance. So you probably throw another 350 on top of that for car maintenance. Maybe you have your car paid off, but it's an extra 350 a month for gas, insurance. So let's just say 350. So what are we at? 25, 700, 1,000, so 42. So around 45, 4,600. All right, and let's just round up to 5. All right, we're at 4,600. Let's just say we're at 5,000 because we kind of estimated a lot of stuff. So you're already at half of that 10,000 with just the basic stuff. And I'm pretty sure I've left out a lot of other things as well as far as expenses. I mean, cell phone, electricity, water, and the necessary stuff that you need around the house, paper towels, toilet tissue, all that additional stuff you're going to need. And so that's probably going to run you an additional $1,000 to $1,500 a month, maybe a lot more. So 5,000 plus the additional expenses, let's just say 1,500 for all the additional insurances, phone and all that, internet and all that stuff. 6,500, right? So 6,500 minus that 10,000, we're at 3,500. So most of you would probably want to save some money each month too for a rainy day. I'm pretty sure you're going to have some type of emergencies during that time where you're retired and you're not in the workforce anymore. So let's just say $1,000 out of that. So now we're at 7,500, and now you're left with 2,500. And that's if you don't have a serious emergency. Emergencies could be a lot more, but we're just putting $1,000 a month for a rainy day. And if you look at it, we're already at 2,500. So again, and then you want to go on vacation. You want to go to different places. You want to do activities. So you could see how quickly just doing the basic stuff. And again, that's probably just for you and your spouse. We're not including kids or anything else that you have going on. Typically, when you're retired, your kids are out the house, so we're not going to include that. But who knows? Some of you like to help out other folks and stuff like that. So, but the point is, you could quickly see how if you're realistic with what your financial goals should be, you should be somewhere minimum at least at that $10,000 a month number. And what you're going to need to bring that in at retirement is around $2 million. You take the number you need each month and you times it by 200, and that's the money you're going to need each month to cover your costs. I think you need to be I think I think 10,000 is a good number, but again, once you start surrounding yourself around people that have higher financial goals, that number is going to go a lot higher for you. Now, I do think at some point enough is, you should have enough, but I think every time you get to a certain point, you're going to want to go to the next level. So if you let's say at 40 years old, you hit that $2 million number, you're bringing in $10,000 a month, most likely you're going to say, okay, if I hit 2 million, why can't I get to 5? I think in everything you do in life, whether it's the gym, whether it's financial goals, whatever you're doing, once you reach the level you got to, and if you have time left over, you're going to want to go to that next level. So and I think it's okay. I think a lot of the times we have people, whether most of the time it's in your family. And the thing here too is like you may have your family that have substantially leveled up as far as what they were used to growing up. Maybe they had some people in the neighborhood that, or the old city they used to live in, and people there just haven't leveled up as far as finances or just quality of life. So now they have gone up in lifestyle, and now they're looking at people there and saying, "Oh, I would never go back to that because I have this standard of living now." But then you have people in your family that want to take it to the next level, and now the way they look at those people that were in that city, and hopefully this is making sense, but the way they look at those people where they came from is how you're looking at them now when you're trying to get to that next level. And sometimes when you try to reach the next level, some people are going to be like, "Oh, why do you need so much? Why do you need $10,000 a month?" And again, I think 10,000 is just being realistic. We broke down the numbers, but maybe you're trying to strive for $20,000, $30,000 a month, or maybe a lot higher, whatever your number is. You're always going to have people that say, "Oh, why do you need that much? Why do you want to get that much?" Right? And I think you can easily break down the numbers and show people why you would want to make that much money a month. Make that much money a month. Maybe it's not for yourself. Maybe you want to help others out. Maybe you want to be financially stable enough to say, "Okay, this person's having a problem. I can go and help them financially because I'm making this much money a month, and it's not going to hurt me to take out of my pocket and help somebody else." So I would definitely recommend to not set your goals to what your family typically, unless your family's just outperforming the typical family. But most family members, they're stuck in their old ways. They want to, they have set a standard for themselves that they don't really want to go above that, right? And when they see somebody going above or trying to go above, it doesn't make sense to them until you achieve that, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, well, duh, that makes sense," right? Because now he could do this, now he can do that. And again, what you're it's all what you're exposed to from a financial environment perspective. And also too, it's one of those things where it's like, as you, again, what I mentioned earlier, as you level up, you want better, and like you just want better stuff. So I was watching the Richard Fain's YouTube channel, and he does live streams every day. And he was saying, he's like, I don't want to be thrifty. I don't want to everything, like I don't want to be like pinching pennies for every little thing I do. Oh, I go on vacation. Let me look for the cheapest plane ticket. Oh, let me, when I go on to this city for vacation, let me look for the cheapest hotel. Oh, let me switch out to different hotel. Like at some point, like when you reach like a certain level, you're like, I don't want to go through all that nonsense. And even plane tickets, right? Maybe your aspiration is to sit in the front of the plane, so that way you get out first, right? You have more space. You sleep better during the flight. Maybe that's something you want. And I think it's okay to, most people are going to be like, "Oh, well, we're going to the same place. There's no point." And I think there's value in a better experience. And as long as you're willing to work for that better experience, I think it's okay. The problem is when people want all these fancy things, these fancy cars, and they're not willing to work for it, or they're trying to ask somebody else for it, or they're trying to bandwagon onto somebody else's financials to get that done. I think that's when you have the issue. But if you're a person that's working hard and you don't want to just be average, like you don't want to fly in the back of the plane on, maybe you don't fly in the back of the plane all the time. Maybe you do fly in the back of the plane sometimes, but maybe you get a first class ticket every now and then. Maybe you fly in the front of the plane. Maybe you get off the plane a little bit earlier, or maybe you do it all the time. Maybe you say, "I'm tired of flying in the back of the plane, people sneezing and some, going through all that nonsense where you're fighting with people, somebody's kicking your seat." And not saying that it probably can happen in the first class, but it's less likely, and you just have a lot more room. And I don't see a problem with people wanting that. I see people all the time too. It's like you'll see again. You usually see it from people that you've grown up with. If you're just trying to reach certain levels, they're just going to be like, oh well, why do you need a? Oh, he thinks that person thinks he's better and stuff like. You're going to hear that all the time. And I honestly just tune all those people out. I don't really care. As long as I'm working for it, I deserve it. I don't really care what other and typically you're gonna get those people sometimes, right? Not all the time. You'll get those people to see like, oh wow, like he's doing this, he's doing that, or she's doing this, she's doing that. They're gonna jump along, and you don't really have to say anything. They're gonna see like, okay, this, there's some reasoning behind this person's actions, and I'm seeing it through the results, and and they'll see it soon. But yeah, I think realistically that you when you create your financial goals, don't just create your financial goals to say, okay, uh, what you think you're limited to. I think you should work the opposite way and say, hey, this is how much things cost. So my financial goals should be this, right? So you need to first have a list and look at the essentials, okay? Rent, medical, food, transportation, bills, like essential bills. Those are the essential needs. I think you need to start there first and then create financial goals. Okay, rent is typically 2,500. Medical is going to be this. This needs to be my financial goal. I think you're going to get better results once you work that way. Because I don't think sometimes it's hard for you to find the motivation to get your financial goals done when you try to limit yourself or put limitations like, oh, I don't really think I could do this. No, when you look at the cost of what things are, most people can achieve those financial goals. It's just going to take some work. But once you already start off limiting what you think you can do, I think that's a bad way to create your financial goals. So I would start off with, okay, this is how much stuff costs. I need to be at 10,000. How much do I need invested to get me to that $10,000 number? And once you know that number, then you can work backwards to say, okay, well, I'm doing this right now. This is only bringing me $30,000 a month. I need to look for another job that's going to pay me more, or maybe I need to develop a skill that's going to help me make additional money. So that way I can get to that number a lot quicker. Because like I said, most people only live until they're 75 or 80. So if you're at that, if you're 25, you're already third of the way done. And most people have a 401k that they don't, that they may have 300 to 400k at the end of that. And it'll bring, again, depending on when you retire, that's going to be enough for maybe the 10 or 15 years you have left. Maybe you retire at 60 and maybe 400k is good enough to just spend. But if you're just going to spend it, then okay, it'll be good for the next 10 to 15 years. But if you just spend it, you're not going to have anything at that 75-year-old mark, and then you're going to be screwed. So yeah, I always think the way I think about money, and I was telling this to somebody before, the way I think about, like, let's say you had $1 million, right? The way I think about it is I'm not spending that million, I'm investing it, and typically you get 5 to 6%. So that million is really only like 5,000 a month because I'm never spending the principal. I'm spending what the asset can bring me. So if I had $1 million, I really only have $5,000 a month, and so on and so forth. If I have $2 million, I only have $10,000 a month because I'm never spending that principal of what I have. So that way I keep it, and it keeps growing. But if you're just going to go ahead and spend all that money, then you're probably not going to last long, right? Like if you made, let's just say you're 30, 35, you make your first whatever million, and you just say, oh, I'm good. I'm just going to go ahead and spend all this and I'll be good forever. You're probably going to run out by the time you're 45 or 50 because you didn't invest your money. But yeah, I think most people should, be realistic. Look at what things cost. Don't, don't limit yourself to what people think you can do, right? And most of the time, it's going to come from friends or family that they haven't really pushed themselves to get to where they want to, or they may be looking at you and saying, okay, well, wow, he's doing all this. It kind of shows that I'm lacking in a certain area, and maybe they don't really want to put in that work. So I would just maybe just isolate yourself from people like that. And yeah, also keeping your financial goals to yourself, I think is good too. Sometimes you can't really keep everything to yourself. Sometimes you have to divulge stuff. If you go to a family gathering or you're with friends and they want to, what have you been up to? Sometimes you have to divulge some stuff, but I would keep most of that stuff secret until you complete those goals, and then it'll be easier to get those things done. I feel like the more people you let in, the less likely things are to happen, or it's just a lot difficult. I just found it when people are in your business, it's a lot harder to get things done because they're always, did you complete that yet? It's like they're almost more like concerned with what you got going on than what they got going on. So I like to keep stuff private. And once you get stuff done, then you can, show people with your actions. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Make sure that your goals are realistic. Make sure that you are, knowing how much stuff costs, so that way you know how much you're going to need when you decide to, call it quits or take a step back from the workforce, and you want to depend on your assets to support your lifestyle. And it's okay to not be thrifty, right? I think you can want better things in life, and people shouldn't look down on that, if you're willing to work for those things, right? But yeah, anyway, take care. I'll see you guys in the next one.